Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the St. Thomas Speedway. That's right, folks. As you know, I go all around the Mid-Atlantic area doing these Ghost Track segments, and this is the latest edition of On Track with Mike Ghost Track segments. I am racing announcer and promoter Mike Donald. Thanks for being here. We're in St. Thomas, Pennsylvania, and this post right beside me is signifying it's marking the entrance into St. Thomas Speedway, which is just over my left shoulder. This was a quarter-mile clay oval stock car racing track that opened in 1955. It closed in 1973. We're approximately 30 to 40 minutes north of the Hagerstown Speedway, approximately 30 minutes or so east of the Valley Speedway, so that you can kind of get your coordinates as to where we are. And this was a thriving track in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. We're going to give you a history lesson on this track and show you the sights. Unbelievable what is still here on this track. Stay tuned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Donald back with you, and we are on the front straightaway of what was the St. Thomas Speedway. This was, again, a quarter-mile clay oval that opened in 1955, closed in 1973. We are right here at what would have been the focal point, basically the start-finish line, the flag stand, victory lane. This is where it would have all happened, mainly here at the St. Thomas Speedway. Now, when the St. Thomas Speedway was originally built, there was a group of stockholders, shareholders that purchased it, including Earl Mayhew and Webb Kendall. And they purchased it, and it was called the Chambersburg St. Thomas Speedway. And they operated this track until 1962. And then the land was purchased by Wayne Walls Sr. and his four brothers. And they operated the track until 1973. Now, the track would run one night on a weekend. There were some years it raced on Friday night. There were some years it raced on Saturday night. So it was Friday nights some years, Saturday nights other years. They had occasional Sunday afternoon shows, and sometimes it would alternate from year to year, but it would be one night per weekend, whether it be Friday or Saturday night. And I've got Zach here behind the camera. I don't know if he can zoom in, but we're talking about some Friday night and Saturday night races. Believe it or not, if you look up over my left shoulder here, I don't know if Zach can zoom in, there is actually one of the original light poles with the light shade still attached. And that is rare at some of these ghost tracks. Of all the ghost tracks I have done, I have never been to one that actually had some of the light poles. I don't know how well it's going to pick up on video, but you can see the wiring going across from light pole to light pole. There's actually another light pole that goes farther down that way. And as we walked this front straightaway earlier today, there are more light poles. There's another light pole over my left shoulder. I don't know if we can be able to zoom in and see the lamp there on that light pole. We've got electrical wiring that's going right over top of me. And then there was an electrical junction box. You see this old telephone pole that has fallen over. This is where the main electrical source for the speedway was. And then, back up off my left, you can see this old set of steps that's going up here. This is where the original flag stand stood. And you can see the banking. And I'll try not to get Zach tripped up too much here. But as we go through, I don't know how well you can pick it up, but there is some of the old catch fence. And this flag stand, and we're going to take you on here a little field trip. It's very interesting things that we found here. We have found an old tire iron right here. How about this? One of the old Mountain Dew bottles, probably from the 50s and 60s. We have found one of the old Welch's grapefruit cans. And that's kind of interesting as we talk about beverages. This white structure off my left shoulder is what is remaining of the concession stand. So, believe it or not, there's a lot still here. Some of these ghost tracks there's little to nothing left. But the more you look around, the more you see here of the St. Thomas Speedway. Again, after the Walls family purchased it in 1962, it was renamed to the St. Thomas Speedway. And folks, we're going to tell you some more about some of the promoters that leased the track in later years. And we're going to take you around a little more tour of some of these buildings and some of the sites on this quarter-mile clay oval. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we walked a little further off of the main straightaway where we're standing just a few moments ago. We're back here into a little more of the nucleus of the happening area of the St. Thomas Speedway. Now, as a racing announcer, I'm always curious about these type of things, but as you can see right here, this is what remains of the announcer scoring tower, an old press box, maybe where members of the media, newspaper writers would have stood back in the day. This is the old press box announcer's booth. Folks like Frank Saggy, Charlie Bailey were some of the announcers here at the St. Thomas Speedway. Sam Sanders was one of the original flagmen here. We just showed the flag stand, or guess what's really not left of the flag stand, but where it was. And a little further back, this white structure, again, that is the remains of the concession stand. And again, drivers that would have competed here: Red Neininger, Dick Warrenfelts, and the list goes on and on. And of course, you would have drivers like Richard Bonebrake, Denny Bonebrake, Jerry Freeze. I was told that Tom Peck, who did a lot of late model racing that went into the NASCAR Nationwide Series, I was told this was the track where Tom Peck competed in one of his first ever races. So a lot of interesting stories, and we're going to share one about Dick Warrenfelts in a little while, but we wanted to come back here, and I don't know if I can get Zach just to turn around. I know this is just a thicket right here, but we have walked this entire area. This area right here would have been where the grandstand section stood. There was grandstand areas to the right and the left of the flag stand. And I don't know if you saw some of those pictures that Zach had on Facebook, but with the race cars in Victory Lane, the bleacher areas behind it, the bleachers were packed. And this is in that area where the bleachers would have been, right here at this scoring tower and concession stand. We're going to go around the track, and we're going to show you some of the original guard railing, the banking, some of the infield tires, and we're going to show you a drop-off back here on the back straightaway that I think you'll find very interesting. All right, folks. Now, we found something interesting. I don't normally get real excited about a bathroom, but when you're at a ghost track that has been sitting dormant for almost 45 years and you find remains of a bathroom, I told you there's a lot left of the St. Thomas Speedway. This is an entrance of the bathroom, and believe it or not, we can still see some of the original sinks, water heaters right here, some of the original toilet, the plumbing, the piping coming up out of the ground. And you can tell this was a solid built racetrack to have this much remaining after 45 years. I did want to mention, the Walls family, with their tenure as owners, leased this property to several promoters throughout the years. Bill Washinger, and you may know that he is related to Corey Washinger that races mini stocks at the Valley Speedway. Ray Fisher also leased this property. And I'll just slide over here and I'll show you this. We still have one of the old lighting lamps still here on the property. All kinds of little interesting artifacts that we have found walking this property. And again, we're going to start walking the track and show you some of the sites, the bankings, and we'll give you some racing stories. All right, folks, we're on the front straightaway as we start entering turn number 1. Now, behind me is, if you can make it out, some of the inside guard railing. Right there over my right shoulder, you see the support post, the cross member of some of the inside guard railing. And if I didn't mention it, the Walls family purchased this track for $4,000 in 1962. Now, some of the divisions that raced here were the late models of the day, which would have been the old Chevelles, the 57 Chevys, that type of thing. The flatheads, 6-cylinders, old stock car divisions that had enduro races. And, of course, there were several drivers that competed here. Sam Nally. We also talked about Dick Warrenfelts. I just wanted to go through my cheat sheet here a little bit. I just wanted to give you a couple more names. But, for example, you also had Clem LeMaster competed here, Les Mitchell, Pete Mitten, John Burkholder. Again, we talked about Sam Nally. So a lot of drivers competed here in that time frame. We'll walk down a little bit. And again, off to the right, if you can make out some of that embankment right there, that was the outside guardrail area. There are still some boarding. It's fallen down. We can also see some of the old cable, maybe reinforcement cables of the catch fence. And then, as you can see, as we go straight down, you can see the banking right here. That banking, that's going into turns 1 and 2. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Donald back with you here with Zach Crouse behind the camera. Now, we're on the top side of turns 1 and 2. And if you look closely here, you can see the old guardrail posts. Some of the old wooden guardrail. It's right here behind me. Old wooden guardrail posts. And it's quite a few of those old posts going all the way down here in the line. Also off to my left, there's more guardrail posts. And off turns 1 and 2 and a portion of the back straightaway, and we'll show you that here in a little bit, there's a pretty significant drop off here. And of course, there's a lot of the old folklore stories about cars that would clear the guardrail and go over the embankment. A lot of fans and spectators that we've talked to so they can remember drivers going over the embankment in their cars and coming back out onto an entrance on the back straightaway, and we'll show you that in a little bit. But one of the stories that was brought to our attention was driver Dick Warrenfelts. And the story goes that he cleared the guardrail here in turns 1 and 2 back here in the 60s, crashed his car down at the bottom here, and of course broke the battery, and he got battery acid in his eyes. And he got out of the car and was disoriented from the crash, the battery acid in his eyes, and he wandered down through the woods all the way off of turn number 2 where the pond was that the water trucks retrieved water for the speedway, and they found him wandering way down toward that pond from here at turn 1. So he really has some issues the night he crashed, but there's all kinds of little stories like that. But again, it's amazing what is left of this speedway. And just off in front of me behind Zach, and Zach can pan out, you can see that banking, and that's part of the track. And we'll show you more of this track as we go around, but that is some of the original clay from the track, the original banking here in turns 1 and 2. All right, we're at the exit of turn number 2 that heads back behind me toward the back straightaway. And as you can see, look at this banking. This is the racetrack, folks. St. Thomas Speedway from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Right here, it has some of the original clay still remaining. Nice embankment. Off to my right, now you can't tell it now, but this thicket, these woods, this was infield pit area. And this is where the race teams parked, in the infield pit area. They would come through that main entrance where we were standing a little while ago. There was an access road that went behind turns 3 and 4 and came through an entrance on the back straightaway. They crossed the back straightaway and went down into this infield pit area. But I wanted to show you this, the banking, nice banked quarter-mile clay oval. And that banking still remains today. All right, the field trip continues of the St. Thomas Speedway, and we stopped. We wanted to show you a couple of things. Right here, some of the original support cable that went into the guardrail. Still here. And Zach can maybe just pan over to the right. There's a guardrail post. And then back off to the left, you can see behind me more guardrail posts. But interesting, and I'll have Zach be careful here, but if Zach can take a couple steps forward, we talked about the drop-off, folks. Take a look at that. If you got your car up over the guardrail, you were going for a ride at the St. Thomas Speedway. All right, we're on the back straightaway of the St. Thomas Speedway, and off to my right, your left, and Zach can zoom in, and we've got a tire here. I don't know if you can see up under that tree, there's another tire. It's a row of tires. There's actually another tire there. So this marked the inside of the back straightaway. So now we'll just keep it going here. So that was your tire row, the inside of the back straightaway. Now we're walking out onto the back straightaway. This is the back straightaway. And we'll come up a little farther. And again, off to my right is the infield pit area. You can see this berm, this embankment would have been the back guardrail. And this is the entrance that we talked about. The access road went behind the racetrack, and the race teams used this access road, crossed the back straightaway right here, and went into the infield pit area. And there's actually a little bit of remains of another guardrail post sitting right there. So all right, now we've made our way to the outside of the St. Thomas Speedway. We're outside of turn number 2. And this is just a better look of this drop-off. Look at this embankment that goes up, and you can see those guardrail posts up there. So you can see quite a drop-off if you came over the guardrail. And some drivers, like Dick Warrenfeltz, weren't so lucky. Some were lucky and able to even it out and go back up to the access road. It's interesting, the things you see at a racetrack. We were out here a few moments ago and came across a flock of about 10 or 12 wild turkeys, and I can promise you, if you were turkey hunting, you would never see them. But we're out here filming this ghost track and walked up on a flock of turkeys. So interesting. We'll show you a few more things here at St. Thomas Speedway. All right, so we made our way around turns 1 and 2 in the back straightaway. Now we're on turns 3 and 4. This is actual part of the track, turns 3 and 4. Now you'll notice, and you'll wonder to yourself, ask yourself, well, turns 3 and 4 don't look like they're quite as embanked. There's not the degree here of embankment. Well, the reason for that, talking with Richard Walls, one of the landowners now, the original owners, Wayne Walls Sr., actually, a few years after the racetrack closed, just off to my right, they constructed a softball field here. So Richard Walls was telling me they actually came in here and leveled off some of the turns because they had a softball team and they had a softball diamond and played softball games here. So folks, this was a sports facility. All right, at the exit of turn 4, headed back into the front straightaway. And just, excuse me, a few more things. See some of the original guardrail posts on the inside guardrail. And I don't know if we can pick it up very well, but there's actually an old light fixture there. Some more of the lighting for the track. And then, of course, I'll get Zach to pan back. And, of course, we're going down the front straightaway. So your guard railing and bleacher area would have been in here. Talking to the Walls family. You know, one time back in the 60s, this was general admission for $2. So a track that was purchased for $4,000 in 62 had $2 general admission. This track also had thrill shows, rodeos, and of course racing for many, many years until 1973. And of course now the track is owned, according to Richard Walls, it's owned by about 14 different members of the Walls family. And according to Richard Walls, who is a former track champion at the Hagerstown Speedway, and of course his sons have competed at Hagerstown, Path, Valley Speedway, Winchester Speedway. According to him, you know, this track was a thriving track, but I asked him, you know, why did the track close down in 1973? And, you know, basically he told me, he said, you know, it's just had gotten to the end of its run. He said the fan attendance had dropped off a little bit. He said it was lack of sponsorship, and there was just different things. The funding just wasn't there. And this once thriving racetrack that had stock car racing, enduro races, it was a family event that packed the grandstands, closed down in 1973. And 40 plus years later, you can see It's now a ghost track. He told me that this track was actually grandfathered at the time it closed, that this track is grandfathered in, that it could still reopen as a racetrack. So, if you have an extra $500,000, $1 million lying around and you want to come in here and build yourself a racetrack, and maybe the logistical nightmare of the housing development over here, you want to deal with that headache and nightmare, you too can be racing at the St. Thomas Speedway. But I say that jokingly because it is almost highly unlikely racing will ever return to the now defunct St. Thomas Speedway. And other than maybe turkey hunting, deer hunting, maybe the occasional bear, that's what's going to happen. That's your action that you're going to see from now on at St. Thomas Speedway. Race cars will never return to this racetrack. I can say that almost affirmatively. Folks, take a look around. If you don't get out there and support your local racetrack, this is what your local racetrack may become one day. I've done East Lexington Speedway, Craigsville Speedway, Red Bank Speedway, St. Thomas Speedway, and I can give you 100 more tracks that are now closed down and gone away forever. And you may say, well, my track's a thriving racetrack. Well, this was a thriving racetrack at one time too, folks. Get out there, support your local tracks, and keep them going so that years from now we don't come back and film that track and it looks like this. Folks, I want to give a very special thanks to the entire Walls family for letting us come onto their property and film this. I want to thank local racing historian Donald Strait for his invaluable assistance and the information. I want to thank Zach Crouse behind the camera. I am Mike Donald, racing announcer and late model promoter at Valley Speedway. Get out there and support your local racetrack. We'll see you down the road at an active racetrack or, sadly, a defunct racetrack somewhere down the road. Have a good night, folks.